Well, kia ora everybody. It's been a big week here at Parliament, and I'm here with the Associate Minister of Education, Tracy Martin. We've just been having a conversation about the Wellbeing budget that was delivered yesterday here at Parliament by the Minister of Finance, Grant Robertson, and we've been having a bit of a conversation about what's in it for education and what it means for education. There's some big ticket items in here that a lot of people won't have heard about yet, such as the money that we're putting in to make sure that schools don't have to rely on donations from parents in order to make ends meet. So for schools that don't ask parents for donations, we're giving them an extra $150. And I was talking to Grant Robertson about this last night. Actually, he was saying he got a text message from a school board of trustees member who said that they were on a board of a decile 2 school, and for that decile 2 school they really struggle to get donations in, and they might get $2,000 or $3,000 a year in donations. And under this policy they're going to get another $70,000 a year, and that's going to be quite transformative for them. That means more teacher aides, it means more resources in their classrooms, and it means a really big difference for them. So we're pretty excited about that part of the budget, and we've been getting some pretty good feedback about that too. So there's a lot in this year's budget.
Yeah, because you put in what, $1.2 billion into school property?
Yeah, that's right. So this is the biggest increase in school property spending ever, and it's pretty exciting because it means normally we would just allocate 1 year's worth of school property funding at a time, and so we're always sort of playing catch up. And so this year we've decided to move to funding school property on a 10-year basis. So we look ahead and we say, what do we need for the next 10 years? And we know the population's growing, so we know we're going to need more classrooms, we know we're going to need more schools. So putting $1.2 billion in, it's the first 4 years worth of the 10-year property plan, and it means that we can actually get ahead of the curve a bit, and that way we're not always playing catch up. And so we're going to be making announcements over the next year, and in the next couple of years actually, about new classrooms, new schools.
Yeah, I mean, it seems so simple, doesn't it, really? Because teachers and schools have been complaining for years about why is it always last minute, and then here you are, you've managed to just look, let's just plan this over a bigger, longer period, plan out for the future, and you've got $1.2 billion in this budget. Well done. And
it means we can get better value for money as well, because we can think ahead and we can make sure that we're getting the best value for money the money that we're spending.
Exactly.
You mentioned the feedback that we get. One of the things that we get a lot of feedback on when we go and visit schools, and you and I have both talked about this a lot in the time that we've been doing this, is learning support. It's the single biggest issue that gets raised with both of us, I think, when we go into schools, and it's your area of the budget, and we've made some big progress there too.
Yeah, no, we have, and I mean, because as you quite rightly say, and when we were in opposition, it was raised with us a lot. Catherine Delahunty was part of our little team there on an inquiry into dyslexia, dyspraxia, and children in the autism spectrum. So to be able to get that commitment of $217 million for 600 learning support coordinators on the ground, knowing that we also needed to change the way that we delivered learning support, not just to those kids at that really hard, complex end, but also those with moderate needs that literally have had nothing. So really thrilled to see that. But also we've got, I think it's another $81,000 to meet some of the cost demands around learning support that we've been hearing a lot about over the last year. And that's going to be good for our teachers, because we know the stress that they've been under in those classes trying to deliver for those students without the resourcing that we're now putting in.
And that's been one of the big frustrations, I think, for schools, hasn't it? It's every now and then they get a big spike of extra funding, and then the population keeps growing and the need keeps growing, but they don't get more money. And so with this year's budget, of course, we're putting the money in to make sure that we're keeping up with population growth.
And having that sustainable new workforce, making sure that we've got a different way of delivering closer to the ground, faster for the children, and what parents asked us for, which was one point of contact inside the school, so that they can go and don't have to re-explain what are the needs of their children.
So one of the things that we've been trying to do in this year's budget is make sure that we're looking at things across the whole of government. So rather than just looking at what does education need, what does health need, what are other parts of the system need, we've been trying to say, actually, there are things that cut right across. And one of the things that cuts right across is the Nurses in Schools program.
That's right, and again, to take weight off some of our teachers. And we know that the Nurses in Schools have been really successful. Dr. Clark announced it, but it was one of those, as you say, this affects everybody. It's coming out of the health budget, but it's going to be inside of schools, another support.
And we're putting a bit more money into a combined physical activity program in schools, which is joining up Spark, Health, well, they don't call them Spark anymore, is it Sport and Recreation, Health, education, all combining together to get better health outcomes for kids.
I think the other thing there's a small amount, there's like 2.2 million that's in there to start to build some resilience programs available for our children, because we know while we put more money as a government into mental health, both for our young people and our major populations, we also need to build that resilience for our young people. So it's really nice to see that we've put some money in there for that.
Yeah, and the wellbeing budget, you know, a lot of the things that are in the wellbeing budget are going to have a big impact on kids' readiness to learn when they come into the classroom, because we know if they're in a warm, dry home, we know that if their parents are being well looked after as well, if they're getting the health care that they need, then they're going to be better prepared for learning.
And I mean, you know, in one of my other roles with Rangatamariki, for example, I know, again, schools and teachers have constantly called for children who are in really stressful situations, perhaps there's family violence or whatever in there, how can they quickly get support for those children? So all those other announcements will impact inside the school day. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I'm really excited about too is that we're working really hard to break down the financial barriers to participation in education at all levels. And we heard quite a lot when we were on the select committee about NCEA fees, for example, and the fact that they're a barrier for a significant group of kids who are completing their NCEA, but then they're not getting their certificates because they can't afford to pay the registration fee. And so this year's budget abolished the registration fee. So now everybody gets an equal access to NCEA, and I think that's really good news.
What about there's quite a big piece of work that you're doing around the review of vocational education, but that impacts on what's happening with regard to careers advice and the way that students in our secondary schools particularly are going to be able to sort of move forward into employment opportunities.
That's right. I mean, we always think about and talk about the kids who go from school to university, and there's been this huge emphasis on that over a long period of time, but that's actually fewer than a third of the kids who leave school go straight to university. And so with the work that we're doing around careers advice, around vocational education, we're actually saying those kids who go straight into the workforce, the kids who go off to do polytech courses or go and enrol in the wānanga, they deserve to have our attention every bit as much as kids who go to university. And so we've got to get the whole vocational system onto a much more sustainable footing. And there's a real demand now, strong economy that we have, for people to be earning and learning at the same time. So they don't want to have to choose between going and getting a job and doing education and training. They want both of those things to be connected up. And actually employers want that too, because it means their workforce gets more productive. So we've got just under 200 million set aside for the reform of vocational education, and that's going to have a big impact on the options that the young people have coming out of school.
Yeah. There was one other little thing that was in there. It was very much a focus of the Green Party. Around energy efficiency, is that right?
That's right. So we've been working with the Green Party to get more energy efficiency in schools. We can put better lighting in schools that gives a better output lighting, for example, and actually a better learning environment. It's cheaper to run. So we're going to be making more announcements on that soon, but money's been set aside for energy efficiency initiatives in schools. There's a lot we can do around heating, around lighting and so on, and that'll make a big difference to schools' bank balances, because it saves the money in the long run, and it's actually better ultimately for the environment too, which is good news.
And you can obviously build it into the New Zealand curriculum because it's flexible like that the young people can learn. This is good for the environment, it's good for you when you're at home, if you can change to this sort of energy efficiency. So, it's win-win-win really. Yeah.
So there's a lot in this budget for education. What we've talked about here really is just some of the highlights, aren't there? Because there's a lot of detail in it, including increases in operations grants, early childhood grant funding to make sure we're keeping up with inflation, a bit of extra funding to make sure that schools are able to meet the minimum wage cost pressures that come from increasing the minimum wage and making sure that people are fairly paid in their schools. So there's a heck of a lot in this year's budget for education. I hope you have a chance to check it out and take a look. It's all the information's available online, and I think what it shows, though, is that we were always really clear we weren't going to change everything overnight. But this is our second budget. We're taking a second big bite at it. So we did a lot in last year's budget. We're having another really big go at it this time around, and we'll be doing more next year as well.
Kia ora.